Right. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to Santaquin City Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. All right, I believe Commissioner Lance has volunteered to get us started with the thought.
This came through my email today. This quote was by Winston Churchill. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give.
Well said.
That's good.
Thank you. Would anyone like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
I'll lead us, Trevor.
Thank you.
Oh, you can do it, Michael?
That's okay, you can do it.
Okay. Everybody please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Okay, tonight on the agenda, it's there on the screen. I'm not going to read it, but that's what we're going to do. So, unless anyone has an argument for why we should change things around, I think we'll go in that order. But we need to start with public forum. So, there's no one here, but we'll open the public forum at 7:02. Anyone? Okay, then we will close the public forum at 7:02. And we can just move right into agenda item number 1.
Okay, so this was something the Planning Commission discussed last meeting. If you remember, we had a member of the public that was here interested in having a nail salon in the MSR zone. Planning Commission, specifically Commissioner Hoffman, mentioned that maybe we need to have a specific definition surrounded around cosmetology and those types of uses. And then consider allowing that in the Main Street residential area of the Main Street Business District zone. So we've come up with this proposed definition, basically to fit in with other definitions. We've called it commercial, cosmetology, and we've defined it, or the proposed definition for this term is establishments which are designed and intended to serve the daily or frequent cosmetology service needs of the surrounding population. Such establishments typically include hairstyling, skincare, tanning, makeup application, eyelash treatments, waxing, nail care, permanent makeup applications, and other beauty treatments. This does not include tattooing. Now, to explain that a little bit, let's see, it's not going to be there. I just put the commercial ones on there, but permanent makeup applications, we actually have a definition for that term in our code right now. And for those that are wondering what exactly that means, that is a business where a permanent design or mark is made on the skin by pricking it and ingraining it in an indelible pigment for masking discolorations on the body or cosmetically enhancing facial features only. This does not include a tattoo parlor. So that's why in that definition I included this does not include a tattoo parlor. These are for the types of things that if someone loses their eyebrows from a burn or something, those are the types of treatments where they can
It's called microblading.
My eyeliner
Yes, whatever
tattooed. I got you.
you call it. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a tattoo, but it's more for like providing those types of services for those types of things. So as we just read of that definition, so that's the definition that we came up with. That was kind of a combination of a handful of different definitions, and we tried to make sure we had as much detail so that it was clear what exactly that meant. And then the only other thing in this proposal is let's see, permitting it. Let's see, that's probably something that we forgot to put in this draft that we'll need to do moving forward. But we just need to put we reference it in here, but we just need to put the land use table in there, putting that land use in there and making it a permitted use. I think we've already applied it in the land use table that we're working on right now. So you can see there we got commercial cosmetology, but obviously this might not necessarily go at the same time as this land use table. So to accommodate those people that are here that are anxious and interested in doing that sooner than later, that's something that we'll add to this ordinance, is just a specific reference of that table making commercial cosmetology a permitted use. So I apologize that we didn't put that in there, but that's something that I just realized. So that's the proposal based on the conversation we had at the last meeting, and yeah, happy to answer any questions you have about it.
Very good, thank you. We do have a public hearing, so in order to meet that requirement, I suggest we do that now. So I'll open the public hearing at 7:06. Would anyone like to comment during the public hearing? Okay, we will close the public hearing at 7:06. Commissioners, thoughts or questions?
I think it's defined well, and I think we do need to put the land use through with it at the same time.
I agree. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We've got it in the other discussion we're having, which is kind of on the same area, right? You saw in the draft that we included permitted in all 3 areas within the Main Street District's zone. Does that seem reasonable? Is there any discussion about that? Is everyone happy with the definition? I know we talked about, Drew, last time, maybe including tattooing in there because it's
No, I
so
think
similar,
it's
but
appropriate that we leave the tattoo businesses separate.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good idea.
And I think the other reason we did that is, again, going back to our definitions of our code, we have a specific different separate definition for a tattoo parlor. So
Already on the books.
again,
yeah.
I think our code kind of intended for that to be a different land use.
Yeah, those usually aren't a home-based business like cosmetology businesses are. That was my point, was most of these businesses are already allowed as a home occupation.
Right.
So why wouldn't we allow it in this zone where tattooing is not? So
Yeah, I mean, I could see the argument for just including them under the same definition, but to be honest, that's not really what we're talking about in this agenda item. But when we get to number 3, if anyone feels strongly about that, right, we could talk about that. So, okay. What do you think? Anything else? So our job is to forward a recommendation on this to the city council.
Trevor, I'll make a recommendation that we forward a positive recommendation. Do you want an ordinance number on there, Jason?
We'll come up with that. I think just you could recommend the language as
Okay.
proposed, maybe with the condition that I include the land use designation in the
We'll
ordinance.
forward a positive recommendation for an ordinance amending Santaquin City Code to define commercial cosmetology and permitting the land use in the Main Street residential area on the Main Street Business District zone, providing for codification, correction, and scrivener's errors, severability, and an effective date for the ordinance,
Along with the proposed land use.
along with the proposed land use table to be included.
Yeah, and I included it in the description. I just didn't put the actual land use table showing the change in there. So, yeah, that was an oversight on our part.
All right, that sounds good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Waite. Let's vote. Commissioner Wood, aye. Commissioner Lance?
Aye.
Commissioner Romero?
Aye.
Commissioner Howard?
Aye.
Commissioner Waite?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Aye.
So that proposed ordinance amendment is forwarded to the city council with a positive recommendation, and it's unanimous. Very good. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 2.
Okay, as mentioned in the last meeting in reports, we've got a proposal for a drive-in restaurant that is going to have some drive-through lanes. This is specifically a McDonald's restaurant that is currently in the site plan review process. It's not just applicable to McDonald's. I just reference that because it's something that's currently on the table right now. But this would apply to really any drive-in restaurants that would happen now or in the future. So right now our code only allows for 2 menu boards per site. And so we kind of see that as not really consistent with a lot of the drive-in restaurants these days. They usually have multiple drive aisles, and sometimes they'll have 2 menu boards per drive aisle. One that you can look at in kind of preparation for getting up and making your order, and then one actually where you take the order so that you can remember what it is that you are wanting to order. So we looked at that and thought this is probably something that we need to modify just so that we're not going to have any conflicts with these common drive-in restaurants that are that would likely come to the city for want to locate in the city in the future. So our proposal is to change that to, instead of per site, 2 menu boards allowed per drive aisle. And then there was some language that says must be located behind the front landscape setback area. I just really didn't quite understand what exactly that was trying to say or accomplish. And I don't think there's a situation where a menu board's going to be, right behind the sidewalk or anything. It needs to kind of be on the driver's side anyway. So I wasn't quite sure with that. I thought that just made things a little bit more confusing. But if you see a need for that, we can keep that. In addition, there was some language in here that was kind of confusing. The following shall apply. This language I'm reading from the code right now. The following shall apply, although the Planning Commission may approve them at different locations at the time of site plan review only. A couple things there that was kind of a concern. One, there's nothing in here that really talks about the location, I guess, except for the front setback area, but why there would be a Planning Commission approval for a modification to that, I don't really understand. And two, Planning Commission doesn't really review site plans, and so that kind of was confusing as well. So instead of having that there, it would just be the Planning Commission may approve additional menu boards. So again, we didn't really see that there was much in here that was talking about location, except for, like I say, the front landscape setback area, but I'm not even quite sure what that's referring to. If we need to clarify that, we can do so. But and then finally, the other thing is in working with this current applicant, they indicated some informative directional signs, as our code calls it. Sorry, my computer's lagging a little bit. And the signage that they had that they commonly use is 5 square feet and 7 feet in height. And so right now our code only allows for 4 square feet and 4 feet in height. It was not that much of a difference, and I think if it's something that a McDonald's would do, that's probably a pretty safe bet that most other of these similar types of drive-in restaurants would use as well. So that would be like I think they said their sign was technically like 4 feet, and then they'd have like a 3-foot post that would kind of get it in the air. And their explanation to us, as we talked about that, was, there's people who have really tall trucks, and if you keep it only down to 4 feet, then it's kind of hard for some of those people to see those signs. So that's why it maybe is justifiable to have it just slightly taller. Again, that's just for directional or instructional signs. So those are the proposed amendments that we put together that seem to make sense. And yeah, happy to answer questions you have, or the Planning Commission again will make a recommendation, and if you have some other input or suggestions on how to change this language, then we can apply that as part of your recommendation. So
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. We do have a public hearing on this one, so let's go ahead with that now. I'll open the public hearing at 7:14. Would anyone like to comment on this proposed code amendment? Okay, in that case, we will close the public hearing at 7:14. All right, discussion, commissioners.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, why are we limiting the height and the square feet? Isn't that gonna be dictated by somewhat common sense? You're not gonna put in a 20-foot tall ordering board. You might put one that's 20 feet long. Well, it has some cool video display on it or something, but is there a reason?
My response to that is you'd be surprised. So one, I think that's there, is I think it's maybe appropriate to have some limit, but two, I think a lot of the reason why cities have sign regulations is just to try and not let it get too cluttered with lots of signage. I mean, if we didn't have any sign regulations, like I say, you'd be surprised at what some businesses would do with signage. So, I mean, as our sign regulations are, in my opinion, I think they will apply as much signage and will do what they can to get as much attention as possible. And that's probably good for business, but when each business is trying to compete for that attention, signage can get pretty out of hand. So that's why we have some of these regulations. You know, I hate to call any specific city or area out, but you know, a lot of people will what they'll relate to is, you know, we don't want to look like State Street Norham, because that's a good example of just lots and lots of signage that people feel looks a little too cluttered, and takes away a little bit from that aesthetic appeal and character that a lot of cities want to have.
That's a good question, though. I agree. I think it makes sense to keep, you know, some regulation in there. And as this process shows, if someone can come make a compelling case for why it should be changed, I think we're willing to look at that. But I don't know. We've had a lot of discussions about signs over the years. I mean, you'll remember, Kylie, some long nights, right? And it's hard to know where to draw the line, but I think cities probably like to have a little bit of control over what happens, you know, in the end, and what that final aesthetic at the street level looks like. And so that's probably what it's about.
So I'm just concerned, we're out of the public hearing, right? We're discussing now?
I don't think you ever started a public hearing.
I did. I think I opened and closed it.
He opened it and closed it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just wondering why you need a 7x5 sign to direct people to your drive up. Like, I get at the drive up, but I'm just thinking like of a 35 square foot sign to get you in the direction to go.
Yeah.
And that was from ground level, right? So that's the height of the sign from the ground, 7 feet? Or is that the size of the sign
And
itself?
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying let's talk about it.
It's a
'cause
good question,
I don't
yeah.
know.
It's only a 5 square foot sign, so it's
Yeah.
not huge.
And
Oh,
it's
5 square foot or 35?
5 square foot and 7 foot tall for the direction.
gotcha.
For the
Okay.
directional.
Signs are
For
5
directional.
square feet.
And sometimes you'll see those signs where it directs them to pull forward to pick up their order, or you
I
know.
was thinking it was the same as the one below. That
Or
was
drive
35
through this
square
way.
feet, something
Yeah,
like that.
this is for signage
Yeah,
that
no, that's a good
that
question.
provides direction or instruction and are located entirely on the premise in which do not in any way advertise a business. So it's really,
It's
you
not
know,
35
identified
square feet, it's
restrooms,
5.
public
Thank you. I don't
telephones,
know.
walkways, things like that. So
Can we also talk about, I know you struck through and you said it's a little confusing, the verbiage.
mhm.
Also, can you blow it up because I don't have my glasses?
Uh-huh.
Well, yes. So where it says "and must be located behind the front landscaped setback area," I would be concerned with eliminating that. That would allow people to put a big old menu sign right on Main Street.
Well, I guess that's a good point, and maybe a good way to do this is, let me pull up Google Maps. So as we look at these, we think of how would this apply? What does this look like if you put it on the ground? So for instance, we have Little Caesars. That's an existing business that's there,
Right.
and they have their drive-through there. What exactly does the front landscaped area setback mean?
Right.
Their drive-through is between their building and Main Street. So is that considered the front Main Street or the front landscaped area setback?
Right.
Again, I'm not quite sure what that is meant to say.
Right.
I think it probably is intended to say that it can't be in the front setback. But in the case of these businesses that we're going to have on Main Street, that drive-through is in the front setback. So are we saying that they can't have a menu board in their drive-through because it's between the building and Main Street?
Right.
There's another business in town, and I wonder if that's where that language came from. I'm thinking of Santaquin, right, where they've got their menu board right on the front corner of the building, and I
Yeah,
wonder if it was
right
written
on
that
Main
way
Street. Right. Exactly.
to keep it from being, you know,
Mhm.
poking out from the building basically into the public right away. And that's a bit of a special case. I mean, most businesses are not going to be oriented in the same way.
Right. So you're referring to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's right on the side of their building, isn't it?
Yeah, right,
Right.
by the window.
Yeah.
And I agree, that's a unique situation. I mean, we've kind of dropped this term lately. That's probably a legal non-conforming use in the fact that it's a very old business, old restaurant. If a restaurant were built that, they'd probably need a little bit, maybe not more setback, but at least the drive-through standards may be a little bit different. You know, another example that we have of a drive-through that is in that front setback, or a menu board, if you will, is
The
in
drugstore?
it's our one of our planning commissioners. She's not here tonight, but the new car wash there, those could probably be considered menu boards. That's where people you know, make the transaction for their car wash. So we have this there. Like I say, I don't want that language to, if we really dissect that language and try to apply one, I'm not quite sure exactly what it means, and two, if I do, and as the zoning administrator, my interpretation of it would probably be that it's meant to what did I do there? It's meant to prevent. Holy cow! I'm sorry. It's meant to prevent those menu boards from being in a front setback.
So can we just reword it to say that? Because I agree, I don't know what that means either.
And must be
Right.
located behind the front landscaped setback area.
Yeah, I agree that the verbiage is confusing, but I think that you don't want to eliminate people not being allowed to put their menu right at the entrance, the driveway, you know, in the grassy knoll,
Right.
right along Main Street. I don't want to see the menu as I'm
Right,
driving
right,
down Main
right.
Street. I want to see the grassy, you know,
Yeah.
landscape, and then I'll pull
Right.
in and look at your menu.
Yeah.
And like you said, you don't want to look like State Street and Orland. So just changing the verbiage so that you have to have it set back a certain distance.
What about behind the front elevation of the building?
Well, again, then
Yeah, again, this one is
then we
tricky,
have
right?
Little
So-
Caesars that would be an issue. We'd have our car wash, which would be an issue, and maybe
Yeah.
some of those things were missed.
Well, I don't think the car wash is an issue. It's behind the landscape. Like, even though it's in the front of the building, it's not right on the sidewalk. You know what I mean?
So
It's
not,
Yep.
maybe it can't be within the setback and take the landscaping terms
Must
out
be
of it with that.
behind the setback facing the street.
It can't be within the front setback.
Well, the thing is usually buildings are going to build right up to the front setback. So if it was behind the setback, then there's no room at all to put it in front of the building. Because usually,
But if the building's right there, then the drive lane is not going to be there.
Correct.
right, but the drive lane doesn't have a setback. I don't think we have anything that says the drive lane can't be.
Right, but the Little Caesars, the building is not right at the setback because the drive lane is there. Right, the drive lane is the drive lane within the setback from Main
It
Street.
may be. I'm not 100% sure. I need to look closer at that site plan again. But usually, and in this case, that was kind of a question we had to coordinate with them: is what's the front of the building and what's the back of the building?
Right.
And I think when it came to signage, we looked at Main Street as being the front of the building because that's where it was most visible. Even though everybody is going to enter from the north side of the building, the most visible from Main Street is going to be the south elevation. So, yeah, it gets a little bit tricky, particularly when you have these types of commercial lots that are situated like this. And I agree. The situation that we talked about with the Santaquin is probably something that we would want to avoid. I don't know what's happened there, but at the same time, I can also see the other side of things in the Little Caesar situation and the car wash situations.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the Santaquin. I think the fact that it doesn't poke out from the front of the building,
Right.
in my mind, that's fine.
Mhm.
But I don't think we'd want to see it any further forward, right, in front of the.
Well, I think
In
you
that
get,
case.
I think you get a big name that comes in that's got the money to spend, and they'll put as many signs up as they want. I think that they
Right.
will do exactly what we don't want them to do. So I think maybe
I
we
agree.
need to
Well,
err on the
yeah.
side of caution.
There's another old example of maybe that's not the intention because, and this even still shows the old Taco Time. It's now the Einstein Bagel Brothers, but there's the menu board right there.
But is that considered the front of the building?
Uh-huh. That definitely would be for that one.
For me, the verbiage is talking about like the little grassy area
The
right
park
there.
strip.
So this
Like,
is
yeah.
this
For
is
me,
city.
that's how the verbiage reads.
Yeah.
City
It would
right
have to be behind that, which that would be fine because
Yeah, that's
it's
city
in the
right away.
drive-through
Can
at
go
that
from there
point,
anyways.
Yeah.
past the sidewalk.
Well, and if that's what you want to change it to, so this is actually technically city right away. This
Mhm.
isn't part of their front setback.
Right.
It's not even on their property. This is the city's right away. So if you're all good with that, we could change that and must be located behind the city right away. But that's kind of a given anyways.
Couldn't put it in
We
city
we are
right
not going to let them put a menu board in our city right away anyways.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, where would the menu board have to be put if we change it? If it's the way it's written,
If it's the way it's written
it would
now,
have to be on the building, basically.
well, like I say,
Could you say
I think that's a little bit ambiguous in my opinion. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not sure,
if I'm reading it
'cause it would have to be behind.
and trying to interpret what it's saying, I think it's probably trying to say must be located behind the front setback.
So when you go back to taco time, the setback you're talking about is where the building starts. That is the setback zone.
Well, I can tell you that let's see, this would probably be in the MSC zone. And again, I don't know the situation here. I'm just pulling up
Right,
Google
sure.
Maps and looking at
It
scenarios.
just helps
But
us visualize.
but whether the front setback is back where the building is or whether it's up front, I don't know as necessarily it makes that much of a difference.
So I know commercial setbacks you can be at 0.
Mhm.
So you can build right on the property line.
Right, and in that case, they couldn't put
so
a
that
mini
makes
board
no
in front
sense
anyways
if we say
because
it's behind the setback, because if there isn't one, then what?
Mhm.
I don't know what the solution is. Man, that's hard.
Difficult.
Is there anywhere where the city right of way is like right on the sidewalk, for example? Anywhere that we
The-
don't have a park strip?
So, you mean where there's like a combination sidewalk where there's no park strip? It's just
Yeah, it's like sidewalk right on the street.
I mean, we have situations that in our commercial areas. I mean, in some of the older parts, I'm guessing that like Big O Tires would be that situation, but obviously there's quite a bit of grade in between them and their business, so there's no park strip there. But this is not a good example because they're not going to be right on top of that anyways because of the steep grade there.
Right,
I
I
guess-
guess the Santaquin is like that, isn't it? Pretty sure it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That might be a spot where there is some sidewalk, but that's all going to be ripped up here soon, anyways. With I'm trying to think if we're going to have. I think we're going to have a park strip all along Main Street with that widening project. It's going to be basically what you see here with where the planters are at. That'll be perpetuated down. It may not necessarily initially have planters like we have there because that wasn't.
What
Gonna
was
be-
your question?
I was just wondering if there was any cases where we wouldn't have kind of the city right of way extending past the road, right?
How are you going to do that
Like
in
through
front
an
of the Santa
arch.
Queen anyway?
Where
There's
the
no
property
room
line
to
would be
put
like
stuff
right
in
on the
there.
sidewalk or right on the street.
I mean, there's kind of a park strip, but it's not landscaped.
So I know Stone Ridge has a 0 setback on the sides. I don't know about the front.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's zero.
And those are wider sidewalks. I think that
Right.
was in lieu of the setback. I mean, there's trees there. It's not going to be your traditional park strip with grass, but you could say we still have a park strip that's trees, and then it's hardscaped instead of having grass there. So
Okay, let's think of it the other way then. Is there maybe that's just how everyone's thinking about it, but
Sorry.
is
Boy, howdy.
the way it's written, can we think of an example where that would be not desirable?
I mean, I think this particular location is like right next to I-15, so I don't see it's going to be like much light pollution. or-
Yeah. Anywhere else in town where no restriction would be a bad thing.
I know I'm putting my menu board right in front of my house.
So maybe it's fine how it's written.
I can't think of another spot.
Do you feel like the code requires landscaping in the front of these businesses anyway, if there's enough setback or something?
well,
I mean, so if
Yeah.
there is a landscape required, then maybe we just leave it in. And
well, like we said, there's a lot of areas in this Main Street Business Districts area where there's potential for a 0 setback. So, like Stone Ridge Plaza. So, if we go to that code and we go down to the setback table, I mean, each of the area up front, you're going to have a minimum of 10 feet. There may be a minimum of 0 feet in certain instances, but you're going to at least, and 10 feet's not that much. So, let's see, and I'm trying to remember.
so I think at minimum we want it to say setback. I think the caveat is if we want it to say the landscaping, right? I mean, is that the consensus I'm feeling?
Maybe just say behind front setback.
But I think we have some examples where
Yeah,
we
that
already have
doesn't-
signs in the front setback.
But those would be grandfathered in, right?
They would, but do we want to disallow that in all cases?
That wouldn't work. I don't, and that's what I'm saying is I don't think that would work for McDonald's. So, again, that's why I use Little Caesars as an example. McDonald's is going to be located right here, and their drive-through is shown to be much like Little Caesars between the building and Main Street. And so their menu boards may be, I think they're on the plans. They show them kind of here to the west of the building, but you know, if they wanted to put them on the other side, that wouldn't work because again, if we consider that the front of the building, then that would be considered the front setback. So I don't think that would work.
Where do they own to? Do they own to the
Oh,
green?
the
or
commercial parcel is roughly a square like this.
Right, but do they own to the green?
To what green?
No,
That's city right away.
There's a walk right there. And there's a
So
fence
they
behind
own
the
to
wall.
that thin line probably.
Yeah, this is not exact, but for purposes of our discussion, they own roughly a parcel, or they're
there.
going to be building on a parcel roughly like that.
So I guess in Little Caesar's case, it's not an issue because topographically there's a berm there. However, the first thing we don't want them to see when they're pulling in the city is gigantic menu boards. Kind of back to the same thing we were
Yeah.
discussing. So I don't know topographically if it's going to be an issue or not with McDonald's, but I think it's kind of the same scenario. So can they not put it on that west side?
Yeah, you can't do it just for McDonald's either. It's got to be everywhere in the city, which I think that we don't want a big McDonald's menu board right there for CC either.
Right.
Well, and I appreciate the thoughts and feelings that are, because I agree in a lot of cases, but I also kind of see it as if you want a McDonald's, if you want a Chick-fil-A, if you want these things, a menu board is kind of just something that comes with it. And sometimes it's great if they're hidden behind the business, like Dairy Queen. The menu boards, you don't even see it. If you're out on the public street, it's kind of back behind the building. But I mean, if you look at businesses elsewhere, I mean, I don't even know an example, but if you just came up to an area where there's lots of businesses, you're probably going to be seeing menu boards that are way out there in the front that's visible for everybody to see.
Chick-fil-A would be a good example because their boards face the.
But it's also not the entrance to their city.
That's true.
Maybe we need to do have a field trip or
Right, do some
research or something. I don't know.
Searching.
I mean, the other thing, another angle perhaps would be to say it can't be within X number of feet of the front property line. I mean, kind of divorce it from the commercial setback. I think a lot of those ones we've looked at as outliers would work in those cases.
Are they required to have any fencing?
Mm-mm.
Again, not to be specific to McDonald's, but just curious.
If they could do it like that big Burger King did, so that it's not facing the street.
Well, again, we have Little Caesars that I believe their menu board.
It's probably
They don't
there,
have
right?
those
Somewhere.
ones.
I think it's somewhere down in there. Yeah, I know their pickup windows around the other side, but you drive in here, and this is probably a little bit old, but I think their menu board's in front of their building, even though it's not visible because it's sat down there. But
I don't think they have one.
and maybe they don't.
Yeah.
If they do, it's obviously not very visible because
Right.
none of us can think of exactly where it's at. But their pickup window is right there. Let's see if I can somehow.
You'd say it's not face the street. That way, it's camouflaged.
Maybe you say it's not visible from the front setback, or you say it's not visible from something.
I guess let me put it this way. I would caution you not to handcuff yourself. If you really want these businesses in town, like I say, I agree in a lot of cases that you want to have businesses that are aesthetically pleasing and that add to the character of your community. But if you want some of these businesses, a menu board is something you're going to have to live with.
What's worse though, a big McDonald's menu board as they pull into our city, or not having McDonald's?
That's the $1 million question. So,
And they would work around it. No matter what we come up with, they would work around and make it work.
or they would say, we're not coming into your city unless we get you to allow our menu board to be in this location. And sometimes with these bigger name businesses, like it's just a hurdle that is hard to hold them to.
Right.
There are places in the code where it says things like, where it indicates intent without putting a hard requirement on it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, what if, I'm not necessarily proposing this, but what if it said menu board should not be or should not face Main Street or whatever, but must not be located within whatever? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Kind of divorce the intent from, or the ideal from what's actually required. That way, at least there's some statement of intent in the code that says, look, this is what we would like, but we recognize that that may not work for you, and this is the minimum that's allowed.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of muddies the code in a way, right? Because you want to keep it simple and just tied to what the requirements are.
Well, you
but-
can certainly put suggestions in the code, but that's all that is suggestion.
Yes,
a lot
but
of people
I get that, but at least it's there, right?
Yeah.
To indicate what we were thinking at the time.
Well, and we work with people all the time to make it look the best. And, you know, that's why we have an architectural review committee is sometimes we look at those things, and during the site plan process, we try and make things so they function and look the best that they can. But again, I just point to certain situations. This is a little bit old now, but they've changed this drive-through situation where this menu board isn't there anymore. It's actually right here, and it's facing 400
That street,
East.
but not Main Street.
Well, what's the front setback?
I know, that's the
right?
thing, right?
I mean, even if it was, it's not necessarily in the front setback right there. There's like 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Should not face
when-
Main Street would be a reasonable request, wouldn't you think?
I mean, that's kind of what the discussion has been around, right? Is we don't necessarily want it facing, and Little Caesars does. I get that,
Mhm.
right? But
it's blocked because of the
it's
location.
not
like
necessarily
the weird,
visible because
right.
of how it's located.
That's why I say if we go with something like visible.
Or there's screening, right? So that would be an option. There could be screening installed.
Yeah, and this is your recommendation. I just when businesses contact me, and there's language like I can tell you right now, this is going to be a big hurdle for some businesses to locate in Santaquin, and I know there's a huge push from our city council right now to be more business friendly too.
So you're saying the city council is just going to override us anyway? So just
I
go
think the
with
city council would probably not care as much.
But
So
say,
that
as
may
long
be-
as it's on their
what we say
shoulders
doesn't
when they're
matter.
getting yelled at, yeah.
To that point, though, that's totally their prerogative, and we have a
Exactly.
separate process from the city council because
That's
it's a separate
exactly
process, right?
This
And
is
so-
your recommendation, but regardless of what the city council would think about it, I can tell you that would be a big hurdle for a lot of businesses. Is if it worked out for them, great. But if we had language that restricted their menu board from facing Main Street or something, that would be that would not be a great start to a negotiation of them, making a site work for them in Santaquin City.
I feel like it can face Main Street, it just can't be on
on Main Street.
the landscape right away. Like has to be behind the planter boxes a little bit.
And it has to be because the
Yeah.
planter boxes are
As
city
long
right
as
away.
that's how it reads, I'm okay with that. It can face
Mhm.
Main Street all at once because it's going that way and I'm going this way. I just don't want to be looking at the front of the menu board as I'm driving down the street, I guess.
Mhm.
Is my
That's
point.
what everyone sees. I mean, trailer court on the left, McDonald's signage on the right. I don't know. I mean,
Hey, just tells them we got a place to stay and something to eat.
Destination.
It's
I think our city has also worked really hard to make the entrance of the city aesthetically appealing.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh,
The
that was
light,
cool.
the lighting, the planter boxes, all the things, just so we can look sophisticated, upscale, come to our city, we're awesome. So I'm not saying we need to overregulate, but I'm saying we probably need to think it through.
Maybe if we saw examples, like you mentioned, of these different places, like in Orem or Payson, to see maybe examples of Orem of what we don't want.
Well,
Main
I'm
Street to
thinking
look
of
like.
Arctic Circle and Spanish Ford. That one corner is just so ugly, and their menu is right there, and that's the entrance of their city.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just thinking I probably don't necessarily want it to be like that, but I mean, does our code allow that already?
Where is that exactly? I'm having a hard time picturing
Oh,
where
it's
that
right
is.
where
Is it on
the-
Main Street?
When you get off the
left.
freeway, instead of like going to Costco, when you get off and you make a right under on Main Street,
Yeah.
it's on your left hand side. You see Arctic Circle, and their menu board's facing
Okay, so we need to head west, Jason,
Mhm.
over to Main Street.
Oh,
Yeah, it's right there on the corner.
That very
Arctic
corner.
Circle right
But
there.
I mean, realistically, we don't know if our current code would allow that to happen anyway, right?
You see how like
There's our
even the
menu board
Arctic
right there.
Circle sign, even in the grassy area right there, I think that's so ugly. The blue sign over there.
The
The,
yeah.
the monument sign.
That's what I'm thinking that our verbiage is saying you can't do
Yeah.
because it looks ugly. It's not a menu board per se, but it's like a.
I don't know though. We
And see
allow
that
monument
menu board
signs, and I think
behind the
that
front
sign
setback
probably
seems
would be
too
allowed.
cluttered.
Is that considered a monument sign then?
I think so.
It's so ugly.
It's a
I
challenge.
know when all that went in, there was a lot of complaints from the city that citizens in that city that they were very unhappy with the aesthetics of that building, especially where Arctic Circle is, because the back is so ugly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every decision we're going to make is going to be the right one, but I feel like this is probably something we shouldn't super rush on.
What are you thinking, Drew?
Yeah, that's a dandy name. What's that?
What are you thinking?
See, like most of these are behind their front setback. When they do it on the front side, they're either even with the front of the building. You know, they're not out in front of the building and obtrusive by any means.
Yeah.
So, and even the Arctic Circle sign that we looked at earlier, it was right even with the front of the building. It wasn't out in front of the building. So to limit a sign to that behind, or even with or behind the front of the building doesn't seem like it's a huge hurdle to me because every one of these businesses are the same way.
Yeah. I mean,
Except we already have examples in town.
The point
that
was
wouldn't
made
fit,
is if,
right?
if something's done, then things would become legal non-conforming. I think, yeah, it would be a clarification to make it because I think it's probably ambiguous right now. But yeah, basically what we'd be saying is what we allowed for Arctic Circle wouldn't be allowed anymore. And I don't know how Arctic Circle Little Caesars would have done it any differently.
I don't think Little Caesars has one.
But
They do have
They must
a
have one
menu,
somewhere.
But it's
you
not in
can't-
the front setback.
It's on the building, right?
It's on the building. It's not in the
Yeah,
front
it's-
setback. It's behind the landscaping, so it met it.
I've never seen one there.
You can't see it driving on Main Street. You have to be physically in the drive-through to
Right.
see it.
But I still think it's behind the front setback, if that's considered the front setback.
Yeah, I can't think of
Right.
any
I don't
businesses
know
that
if
have
it's
their
on the-
menu boards in front of their building.
Yeah.
And if you're on the property line, you wouldn't be able to go in front of the setback anyway. If there's no setback, right?
Right.
You would
And so
have
I
to
guess
be
my
on the building or
concern is,
behind.
If we allow it, then do we get more signs? Do we get like the menu sign in front and then you get the order sign by the building? Do we end up allowing more signage? Because then they have the freedom of just putting as many signs up as they want, wherever they want.
We currently only allow 2, so we're
Per
limiting
drive
2 per
Yeah,
aisle,
it is limited.
which I think is reasonable.
well, let's say this isn't Little Caesars. Say McDonald's wanted to locate there. Where they're located at this far end of the building, they're not going to put a menu board way over here on the side of the building. That menu board will probably be up here next to their business. And so, you know, that's a Little Caesars right now. But if it was something different in the future, I don't know where they would put a menu board without it being, you know, if it was on the building, that would be great. But technically, it would be in that front setback. So, yeah, this is your recommendation. Let me just leave it at that. But
I'm on both sides of the same fence. I don't know.
May not be installed within the front landscaping.
But what if it's a zero setback?
Then there is no front landscaping.
So then where do they put it?
Yeah,
It's
that's
on the
right.
building or on the side of the building,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Which is where it would have to go anyway, because no, we're not going to let anyone put a menu board in the city right away, right?
Who's determining where the front setback is?
Who's determining who's front? Where's front?
Well,
like, Little
it's written in
Caesars,
the
we don't
code.
know. Yeah.
right? So in certain zones, you have to be so far back from the street.
So what you just said would not allow for this.
The one on the building would be okay because it's behind the setback.
These are
Because
both,
that's a 0 setback, or what?
Well,
are you saying?
technically, it's in the setback because the setback is at the,
I thought this only had a 10-foot setback in this zone.
what's that?
I thought this zone only had a 10-foot setback.
Well, again, this is an older building that it's always hard to know exactly when things were built and what
but what does the code say for this part of town?
10-foot
It's
setback.
10
It's a
feet, right?
10-foot
So
setback,
that's
yeah.
behind the setback.
So it's
Yeah.
behind the setback. Now, you could run into a problem with that language if you're got a business building where there is a 0-foot setback and they wanted to put a sign on the front of the building. That wouldn't be allowed. And if you're an interior, right, like
Yeah,
on
we
a,
wouldn't really want it on the front of the building.
probably not.
A menu. That's
Right.
not
I know,
signage.
it's a menu.
Probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not going to do that.
So you could say at or behind the front setback.
At or behind.
So
And by
basically,
setback, we mean the minimum.
I feel like we're I think this is super confusing because I feel like Little Caesars works. It meets the code as it currently is written, but now we're trying to change it for McDonald's, but it's exactly the same placement.
I think Little Caesars would be behind the front setback, though.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And so would McDonald's.
It's
more
It's
than-
exactly
it's
a
more than
mirror
10
just
feet
on the other
behind,
side
right?
of the street.
Yeah.
I think we just got caught up and we don't want it to face Main Street. Well, ultimately, we can't dictate that now.
You can't, but as long as it's behind the setback.
And in
so
most
I feel
cases,
like it's going to meet exactly the same thing as Little Caesars, personally. And
In-
I think if they met it, then they.
right. And in most cases where there is a 5 or 10-foot setback, there's going to be landscaping there, which will tend to be a natural screen for anything that does face Main Street.
Mhm.
I agree.
Must be behind or at the front setback. At or behind. Does that make sense?
Would that work for Einstein's? Is that sign currently within the minimum required setback?
It's more than 10.
Well,
feet,
they're
yeah.
like I say, theirs is a unique situation because
That sign's not
it's a
there
corner
anymore.
lot that's got double frontage. So
If we were going on Main Street and look back, the Main Street imagery is from 2021 and the
Right.
Fourth imagery is from 2012.
if I zoom
I'm
out,
pretty sure that's the side setback, right? That would not be.
well, it's technically what's called a secondary frontage. So it's yeah, the menu board is right there now.
But it's at or behind the front setback.
yeah,
So that means
of the main
exactly
building,
what you guys
right?
are
The main
saying.
From Main
frontage.
Street. Yep. Absolutely.
And that's your focus is Main Street, not necessarily a side street.
Right.
Yeah. Trying hard to think of a case where that wouldn't work.
Currently, I don't think there are any.
And does it cover kind of the concerns that we've talked about?
Until the next time we talk about it.
Exactly.
So
that's the
will you
nature of
show
this
me where
business.
McDonald's is coming in comparison to Little Caesars.
Across the street.
Yeah, give me a second and I'll pull
Well,
up
I'm just
the.
trying to figure out why that wouldn't work, the current verbiage. Because I feel like that Little Caesars meets that.
I think they do.
Mhm.
They're well off of Main Street.
Mhm.
Well, not only is there a berm, but they're that far
Just the
off.
linear distance is
Right.
like, what, 20, 25 feet at least?
I like the berm.
I do too.
Let's see. Put that in.
In my opinion, I think that's kind of what Orem did was they sold themselves to get these businesses in, and now they have what nobody wants.
Which is what I don't want to happen.
Well, and I know when the signage, from experience, I know when the signage was put on Stone Ridge, it had to be a complete specific style of sign to look like it was turn of the century. So, and the businesses still came in, even though it potentially cost 4 times as much as it would a different
That's your
way.
balancing act. You don't want to turn business away, but you don't want to.
You don't want to give up
sacrifice
your.
Main Street
Yeah, exactly.
to get a business in.
Yeah.
So,
As long as there's a hitching post, I can tie my horse to.
something like that.
Yeah.
always signs. Signs are hard.
Yeah, they are.
The longest meetings have been signs. Is that what you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
For sure.
So yeah, their menu boards are west of the building.
See,
So I don't see an
that's
issue
fine.
with that.
Yeah.
No.
It's
I
not
think
going to
it
mess
looks
with them, and it'll.
So you could put behind the front setback.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say, and tell me if this works for you, is only 2 menu boards are allowed per drive-in aisle, and must be located at least 10 feet back from Main Street.
Must be located behind the front
The
setback.
I think
which is
behind the
10
front
feet
setback.
on Main Street.
Or does it need to be the front setback, or do you just say 10 feet back from Main Street?
I think from the setback.
Setback.
Front setback.
Because there's so many places where the setback varies, and it may be 0 feet, right?
Mhm.
So 10 feet might not work for the Santaquin right now.
like on
Yeah.
Santaquin, like you said, if it's on the front corner of the building, that's the setbacks right there.
It's right there,
Uh-huh.
and they don't have another choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's making it more flexible, not less flexible.
So it must be located at least behind the front setback.
So you just get rid of landscape.
Just get rid of
Yeah.
Right.
area and landscaped.
Okay.
I can't think of any place where that. Can you think of any place where that wouldn't work?
And again, this would be for anything that's new. So
Councilmember Sitaway, can you think of any place that wouldn't work?
Off the top of my head. I've got a week to think about it.
Is that reasonable?
They'll discuss it themselves. I was just wondering if you
Yeah.
could think of any place that.
how and I'm just trying to think of all the scenarios, but instead of saying the front setback, what if you said the front setback area that is along Main Street?
I think it should be
Well,
anywhere.
That would solve the secondary frontage
What
issue.
about the businesses that might come in along 198? What does it do for them?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. Well, and yeah.
I think
What
it should be
about-
behind the front setback.
What if you
where-
just
no
said-
matter where it's at?
Consistent
I think you
follow.
could honestly put both. I think you could say exactly what we just proposed, and then I think you could add or 10 feet off Main. If you wanted to just make sure we're not getting signs like right on. But this is specific to menus too, right?
This
Yeah,
is specific to
this
menus.
is menu
Just
boards.
menu board.
This isn't all signage. This is just menu
Yeah.
boards.
You could also say on or behind the front setback on the primary frontage.
Yeah.
There
that
you
works
go.
too.
There you
There
go.
too. Perfect.
That's a good way to put
Thanks,
it.
Trevor. That's why you get paid the
That's
big
what we need
bucks.
right now.
Well, that, but it also took an hour, right?
Amazing. That's good.
Like I say, I'm just thinking, and this is old, and they found an option that made it work for them, but like this is a situation that I don't know what else they would have done based on the orientation of the building. The driver's side needs to be like, where else would they put a menu board with that? I'm just trying to think of those
Yeah.
situations.
But I think
So,
this would work in that case.
So this would work in both of those cases because it's 10 feet off Main
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
and it's
probably
behind the front setback.
it's secondary frontage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess maybe not for taco time though. That's kind of a hard one to say that it's secondary frontage. I think that would probably be considered primary frontage for this particular business.
I think the verbiage Trevor came up with is good.
Fabulous.
I agree.
So reiterate what you said, Trevor, so I make sure I understand it.
Let me see if I can remember. Must be located behind the front
Primary.
setback on the primary
Of
frontage.
the primary frontage.
Okay.
Behind the front setback on the primary frontage?
Yeah.
I think we're coalescing.
Do we have a definition of primary frontage?
That's actually something that's
Coming up.
on the in the queue of things to define.
Perfect.
But I think there's some flexibility, right? If you're on a corner lot, don't you kind of get to choose which is your primary frontage?
I mean, it depends. I mean,
Okay.
if you're a corner lot in Main Street, your
Well,
primary
you're on
frontage is
Main
probably
Street.
going to be Main
It's gonna
Street.
be
Yeah.
Main Street.
We'll again with the Little Caesars example. I I think that was our interpretation, is that's the most visible frontage, and even though the entrance is towards their
On the other
parking
side.
lot,
Yeah.
I think the whole intent of the code is to make the primary frontage the the most appealing looking, or the place for the biggest sign.
Are we done talking about where the menu boards can go? Because I have one other question.
I hope so.
Right. Can you clarify what it means that the planning commission may approve additional? Are we talking about beyond the 2 that are allowed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just, like I say, was I looked at that.
And I think that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And based on the conversation we had, maybe you want to keep it that. The planning commission may approve different locations.
And to take out at the time of site plan review only.
Mm-hmm. May approve additional menu boards or at different locations depending upon circumstances.
There you go.
And that
That'd
way
be
you have
okay.
that flexibility on a case-by-case
Mhm.
basis.
I think
But
that-
generally speaking, you want to keep this here, must be located behind the front landscape on the primary frontage.
Yeah, the front setback.
Front setback, sorry.
Front
lines.
setback on primary frontage.
that way it
Which
gives
will
it-
naturally place it behind the landscape.
If they don't like that, they could approach us or the council with
Mhm.
with their plan, and if it works, it's not a big deal.
I like that.
You're not changing code or anything, it's just an approval process.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's easier to just do this so that it's crystal clear what it is you're looking for.
Control Z.
Sorry, when I hook this computer up, it lags sometimes and it makes it pretty tricky. Sorry to do this on the fly.
Additional menu boards or different, does he need to take add out?
Or at different locations. I think that's the way it needs to be. I think.
Is that what you're looking for? The following shall apply, although the planning commission may approve additional menu boards. Let's see, we probably need it.
I think you're correct. I think you need to take that out.
You need to take add out as well as them. May approve additional menu boards or different locations,
There we go.
depending upon circumstances.
Mhm.
Only 2 menu boards are allowed per drive aisle and must be located behind the front setback on the primary frontage.
So is that, but that, I feel like B1 is now saying that that's where they have to be. So they can be on a different side of the building, but
But they must be behind the front setback on the primary frontage.
it doesn't say it could be on a different, it's saying it actually has to be there.
I think if it's on a different side, you could argue that it is behind the front setback on the primary
Right.
frontage,
Okay,
right?
Okay.
Right.
But no, that's a good question. Could
I
that
feel
be
like this is
interpreted?
getting so technical.
Right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a good point.
Would that cause any confusion the way it's
Because I'm
written?
not saying you have to have it on that side. I'm just saying you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have it on any side you want as long as it's behind the front setback. On the
Well,
primary.
I can see how Kylie, what's Kylie
Yeah,
saying.
I can see
Yeah.
what you're saying though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't be located in the front setback.
Let's see if it is located.
In the front. It could be in front, but it has to be behind the setback.
I think if the menu's located in the primary
Behind the setback, yeah.
frontage.
You're gonna strike and.
Which, oh, yep. Are we getting any closer?
Mm-hmm.
And they need to mail every citizen of Santaquin a paper menu. Behind the front setback.
So one thing I would add is the minimum front setback, because just because the building setback, that could be interpreted, we want it behind the front setback of the building, which isn't the case. We want it behind the minimum front setback, just because they put the building back 25 feet. The actual front setback is only 10,
Yeah, we're okay with it being with,
as long as it's
Behind that 10.
As long as it's behind the minimum front setback, that's the only thing we're worried about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
So you're okay if it's in front of the building, just as long as it's at least 10 feet
As
back.
long as it meets the setback requirements, yeah. And that's what I was thinking all along.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Good with that?
You're good.
So glad you typed it out because I was writing everything down.
Well, like I say, when we have these types of discussions, it's better to just
Yeah.
get it on paper and make sure this is exactly what you're intending for it to say.
Yeah, because that will cover any zone really, whatever the minimum front setback is. That sign has to be behind that, not necessarily behind the building.
Yeah.
But
Behind the front setback. Yep. I agree.
Some smart people that live here.
I like it.
Just saying.
You're one of them.
These ones, All right.
So our job tonight is to forward a recommendation to the city council. In other words, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council with the proposed changes to the menu board code amendment.
Very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Commissioner Howard. Any further discussion on that? All right, let's vote. Commissioner Hoffman,
aye.
Commissioner Waite,
Aye.
Commissioner Howard,
Aye.
Commissioner Romero,
Aye.
Commissioner Lance,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood, aye. It's forwarded with a positive recommendation unanimously. You threw me, Kylie. I saw McNaff when I looked over at you. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. With that, let's move on to agenda item number 3. This is, I think, our third discussion on proposed changes to the Santaquin City Zoning Code land use table and definitions.
Okay, so this is something the Planning Commission's been working on the past few weeks. We've applied all the comments that the Planning Commission gave to me last meeting of some specific land uses that you wanted to have prohibited, and then also some specific land uses that you wanted to be tweaked a little bit. Based on the earlier recommendation, if that does pass, I'll make that dark because that won't be a change that for a cosmetology commercial. Sorry. So yeah, I think we're pretty close now to as we went through this again and combed through it, and we didn't see any other changes that really jumped out. This isn't to say we have to get it 100% right now. There's always things that we could fix in the future if we miss something, but I think this is a great update to this land use table that corrects some discrepancies and takes care of some land use terms and clarifies their definitions. So there's I know that the planning commission's asked a handful of questions about different things. I try to get some have our staff planner help me remember why he put the automotive service repair major and minor is not permitted in all those areas. Like I say, I remember he was telling me there was something that he found that insinuated that it was not allowed in there anyways. But again, this is the planning commission's recommendation. Really, the next step moving forward would be setting a public hearing, and I think unless you have other comments, this is I think is pretty close and will be sufficient for a public hearing. The reason why we didn't do a public hearing earlier than this is we probably didn't have it quite complete. And then anytime we have a public hearing on an ordinance amendment, we want to have it as complete as possible so the public has a good expectation of what's being considered. So doesn't mean that you can't make any changes or modifications after we've had the public hearing, but obviously we knew there was still some work to do, and so I think it's complete enough to hold a public hearing, and there are still opportunities for the planning commission to consider changes in your recommendation to the city council. So I guess the goal tonight is if you have any further direction on things that you'd like to see before it's presented to the public during that public hearing.
Just one thought, and it's on the automotive service and repair. Could we have some input from Ryan about what he found and why?
Yeah,
because that's going to come up, I'm sure.
I actually texted him to see if he could remind me, and he hasn't responded yet. But I will get that, and
that'd be helpful for next time for sure.
Email that to the planning commission to let you know. Like I say, I remember asking him that question, and it wasn't necessarily anything that we wanted to not allow it. It was just the way our code read, there was something that alluded to it not being allowed there, and so I'll get that clarification so that you can see kind of where that angle, where he was coming from with that when he was helping me work on this.
That would be good.
However, even if we passed it this way, the way that it's proposed right now regarding those, the 3 automotive shops right now would be legal non-conforming,
Right.
and it would run with the land, so they wouldn't have to worry about ever not having that ability. That's just basically anything new.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know as it's that big of a issue, I guess. But
Well, this is just a decision that you'd make of future land uses from the time that this is adopted moving forward. What land uses do you want to see? So obviously the zoning is intended to indicate kind of what you're wanting to see there moving forward. It's not
this is basically everything on Main Street, though, right?
correct. This
Because
is
like anything in Summit Ridge that came in and all that commercial would really.
this is
isn't
the Main
relevant.
Street
Yeah.
Business District zone, which is just the
So
MSR, MSC,
I
and,
don't know if we
and
need any more
CBD.
mechanic shops on Main Street personally, but
And my personal opinion is as long as we've got somewhere in town where they're allowed,
exactly.
right?
And there's 3 places that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So.
And I believe they're still allowed in the commercial C1
Right.
zone, and so there's
Probably industrial, right?
we'd have to look at that to make sure, but
I think it's not in the-
Stay tuned. I think we will get there
It should be.
eventually, right?
so automotive service and repair is conditional in the C1 for major and permitted for minor. Industrial, we don't even list it in the industrial. Again, this is why we're going through this process. We'll eventually
be
get to
added
the
to
industrial
industrial.
zone where we can clarify those things if that's something that you want to have in there. Residential, we see this is a good example. We have automotive service and repair as conditional, but which one is it? Is it minor or major? Our code doesn't clarify that right now. So that's in the RC zone, which that may be a discussion at some point in the future, I know we have an elected official that has a feeling on that.
I have a
Okay, so
question. I have a
that-
question on something else before we're ready to get there.
Yeah, and that was Ryan. He said the reason why he put it in there is because that's something, because it wasn't on the land use table, we assumed that it wasn't allowed. And so that's just consistent with what we've been telling people for the last while, is because it wasn't on the land use table, it was assumed that it wasn't allowed. So if it's something that you think is appropriate on Main Street, then this is certainly something that is appropriate for you to consider in your recommendation. So, yep, we will
Cool.
take
Thanks.
whatever direction you want in terms of, or I'll take whatever direction you want me to implement into this draft ordinance.
I don't have a problem with those as long as the parking lot's behind the building, because they turn into broken down car parking lots, is what they
Right.
turn into.
And I think if going forward it's going to be allowed in commercial and or industrial, then there's a place for it. It doesn't
Right.
have to be on Main Street. It's
Right.
still
Exactly.
in town. It's just not
Yeah.
right on the main track. So I think it's fine.
And maybe in preparation for next meeting, because you bring up a really good point, Drew, and that's why we have we have conditional uses, but maybe a good exercise for you will be to look at the Main Street Business District zone and to read. I know there's a lot that's there, but these are all the regulations and really the conditions of approval, regardless if it's permitted or a conditional use permit. So I think what you said, I think there is language, at least in some of the zones, that talks about having things behind the building, or at least that strong encouragement. But I think there's actual requirements about the building and where things are at and entrances. And yeah, so it's probably good to read through all this so that you have a good grasp of what those conditions are, because that's one of those that I think is one.
Commissioner Waite, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple of them. So the first one, alcoholic beverage liquor store. Liquor stores that offer a modest selection of liquor and alcohol products may be located in hotels, resorts, and as a standalone building. Products are sold for consumption off the agency premises. This includes state liquor stores. So basically a liquor store is, you can buy liquor in containers. It's not to be consumed on the premises, is what that says to me. Am I reading that right?
So, and sorry, where are you reading at?
Under alcoholic beverage on page 2 of 10, alcoholic beverage liquor store.
Okay.
And the reason I'm asking is because it specifically calls out hotels, and a lot of times a hotel will have like I don't know, they'll have a wine selection in their cafe or their restaurant,
Or they'll have a bar in there.
or they'll have a bar in there. And so are we limiting ourselves there? That's my question on that one.
I think that would fall under one of the other definitions, wouldn't it?
Yeah, is it are we defined okay is all I'm asking.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I see your point. The fact that they say that a liquor store may be located in a hotel,
Right.
resort, or as a standalone building. As a standalone building, yeah. Again, I didn't do too much with the definition there. I think really what I was trying to do is just clean up the fact that
Yeah.
we don't define licenses. We've repealed that language and defer to the state code. But I still saw that there was a need for bars and liquor stores that are specific land uses
I think
related
the
to.
catch-all now is for products that are sold for consumption off premises, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. All right, and then alcoholic beverage up above that, it's at the bottom of the first page. It says in containers no larger than 2 liters. Are we inheriting that from the state, or is that a city
I'm
thing?
not quite sure. That's something I don't know for sure about. Again, I didn't dive too much into this language, but that's probably something in preparation for the public
How big is
hearing.
2
I could
liters?
run this by legal counsel and see if,
Half a
and this
gallon.
is particularly an area that he would have a
Lower.
lot more expertise than I do.
I just think we need to review that and make sure that we're
That's less than a liter.
Oh, okay.
we're okay there.
Mhm.
I mean, if I want to buy a gallon of water, I'm not restricted, and I don't drink. But if I wanted to buy enough for my party,
Right.
why would I be restricted to 2 liters? I'll just go buy 6 2-liters, right?
Right.
So what's the difference?
Yep. And that might be
And-
something that's just kind of old language that needs to be updated.
And then the other question I had was on hotel motel. At
Okay.
the bottom of page 2, I think it is. We've struck motel, and it says hotel, a building or group of buildings containing individual sleeping units offered and designed used primarily for the accommodation of short-term guests not to exceed 30 consecutive calendar days or business professionals on temporary assignment, and with automobile parking storage available. And then it keeps going, and it says this definition includes auto courts, motor lodges, which in classic definitions is usually a motel. So are we? I'm just wondering if we're going to get into problems there, because we've called it a hotel, but we're also defining what is classically a motel, a hotel.
So I think the way we saw this is hotel motel is all under one definition, and if you go to motel, it basically refers to this same definition.
Okay.
In a general sense, yeah, there's probably a difference between a hotel and a motel, but according to the way we define it in our code, we just have one definition for it. So we thought, why call it a hotel motel? It would all just fall under the same definition of a hotel.
As long as we're calling that
If you
out,
really
I'm
want to
cool.
have a different definition for motel, that's perfectly fine. But everywhere in our land use code, it looks like where hotels were permitted, so were motels. So
Okay.
I think we just tried to simplify it and just call it all a hotel. But you're right. We
I
actually
just think legally there's going to be some ambiguity there that we want to consider.
And you're right. We looked that up. What is the difference between a hotel motel? I think motels generally they don't have interior corridors.
Correct.
It's usually they park in front of the rooms. Hotel generally is going to have hallways where you get to the rooms.
Yeah.
That's at least what we kind of found. But again,
That's what I
our
was finding
code has
too when I
never
looked it up.
differentiated the difference between the two, and so we just stayed consistent with the way our code read.
Cool. That's my questions.
I think for budgetary purposes, we shouldn't limit how much alcohol is sold, because I think that money, that we need the tax revenue, and that goes to our school systems and everything else, so.
Well, I just don't think the city should get involved with little decisions like that.
Mhm.
But that's
I
me.
agree.
And like you said, if the state regulates it, they regulate it.
Right.
Yeah, like I say, I will run this by legal counsels, so there may be some additional comments and stuff when you see this at the next meeting with the public hearing. So, again, that's an area I don't have as much expertise on. I don't know a lot about, but I know our legal counsel will be able to do that. Any other comments, suggestions, feedback on what we have here?
I think you're probably close to scheduling a public hearing, aren't you?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
like,
I think
well, it sounds like we're talking about that for next time, right?
Close.
So that'll give us one more chance to discuss it and look it over before making a
See
recommendation.
if the public has any feedback, and
So to be clear, I don't have any direction on this draft right here, except for that I'll have legal counsel review it.
I'd like to strike the 2 liters out of that, but
yeah, review the alcohol limits. And
Okay, I'll put emphasis on.
I just don't want the city to get involved in like legislating or codifying paper straws and how much soft drink you can buy. It's just dumb.
Well, and this is exactly why we're doing this, is because this is technically what's on our books right now today. So
Right.
if there's an update that needs to be done to make sure that we're more in line with the current times, then we'll do that. But I'm sure when I give this to legal counsel, our legal counsel is extremely thorough. He would notice that, and I think particularly because of a recent ordinance that the council adopted that repealed alcoholic beverage licensing. This will be something that sticks out to him, and he'll review that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Last call. Okay. We will look forward to this one again next time. Maybe we'll wrap it up. That would be good. Okay. Agenda item number 4. We need to approve the minutes from our last meeting on May 10th, 2022. Do we need to have any discussion on those minutes? And if not, would anyone like to make a motion to approve them?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes on May the 10th, 2022.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Waite. Let's vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, those meetings are approved unanimously. Anything else, staff, that we need to discuss?
I got an email, I believe it was yesterday, and I need to check to make sure, but if you remember last year, we had that training in the fall, in September sometime, up at Spanish Fork, up in Spanish Fork regarding Planning Commission training. So we're looking to continue to do that. Payson City has agreed to host this year. We'll look to maybe host next year after we have our new city hall and a space big enough to accommodate a little bit larger group like that. But yeah, Payson City's indicated they're happy to host this year. They're wanting to get kind of a date settled so they can plan accordingly. They've thrown out the date of, I believe it was Wednesday, September 28th, if I remember right. I don't need like a commitment from you right now, but I just wanted to throw that out there and see if you had any initial concerns with that date. It's a Wednesday evening. If you do, let me know. If you don't, then I'm sure it's something they can start planning for. And again, it's one of those trainings. If you can come to, great. It helps get training hours to meet the new state requirement for Planning Commission training that's required. You do get training for attending so many meetings. I think it's 12 meetings throughout the year, so you get an hour for that. If you've been able to do the training that I think I sent you at the beginning of the year, that's training that will take care of that. And so, yeah, this night I think we plan on like 3 hours, but really it helps you get the last 2. So, just as I saw that, I wanted to just kind of bring that to your attention, and if you have any conflicts with that night, let me know. If not, that'll be kind of the plan moving forward, and they'll probably send out a save the date so that you can get that on your calendars.
And I thought it was very beneficial training as well. I thought it was good.
Well, that was really interesting.
See what the other cities are up against, just like we are. So.
Makes our problem seem really minute, honestly.
Right. I didn't attend, but I did watch it after the fact, and I agree.
Yeah.
I thought it was good.
Yeah. I don't believe I have anything else to report, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. Commissioners, anything on your mind? All right. Someone get us out of here.
I'll make a
I
motion.
do have one more thing, actually.
That was close.
just a reminder, next
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes, next Tuesday
Yes.
What's this Thursday?
is
31st,
the special joint meeting with the city council regarding the general plan. So it's a special meeting, not a regular meeting. Our next regular meeting is not till
The 14th.
yeah, June 14th. So it's a ways before the next regular meeting, but just a reminder that we have that special joint meeting next Tuesday, the 31st.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. And thank you for mentioning the 14th because I will not be here that day.
Super.
Commissioner Lance,
I'll
will you be here?
I got you back.
Thank you.
Betcha.
You're awesome.
Oh, I already have it on my calendar.
Perfect.
See, you're so on it. All right.
Awesome. Love it.
Make
All right.
a motion that we adjourn at 8:24.
Thank you. We're adjourned at 8:24. Good discussion. Thanks, everyone.